I had just turned 19, fresh out of my freshman year of college. To earn some extra money, I decided to work at a remote mountain resort. The resort was nestled among lush, wooded mountains, offering a serene environment. I got the job through an online listing and felt a bit excited, thinking it would be fortunate to work in such a beautiful place. With my bags packed, I embarked on the journey to the resort. After several hours on a bus and a ride in a rickety van, I finally arrived at my destination by dusk. The setting sun cast a golden glow on the wooden buildings of the resort, and the surrounding area was eerily quiet, save for the occasional birdsong. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the creaky door. The resort manager was a middle-aged man who seemed friendly enough. He briefly explained my duties, which primarily involved cleaning and housekeeping. I was assigned to the employee dormitory, a two-story building where I got a single room on the second floor. The room was simple but clean. The first few days went smoothly. I would wake up early to clean the common areas and then take care of the guest rooms. There weren't many guests, mostly city folks seeking respite from a summer heat. I gradually settled into the routine and made friends with a few co-workers. But just when I thought it would be a peaceful and enjoyable summer, strange things started happening. About a week into my job, I began noticing odd details. There was one particular guest room I was responsible for cleaning that gave me an inexplicable sense of discomfort every time I entered. The room always had a faint, strange odor that no amount of cleaning could entirely remove. Even more peculiar was that, despite my thorough cleaning, I would always find mysterious stains in hidden corners. I reported this to the manager, but he brushed it off, saying I was probably being too sensitive, and told me not to worry. Despite my doubts, I had no choice but to continue working. However, as time went by, more anomalies started to emerge. One night, as I was about to fall asleep, I heard strange noises coming from downstairs. At first, I thought it was my co-workers, but upon closer listening, it sounded like someone groaning softly. Alarmed, I got up to check but found nothing but darkness and silence downstairs. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination from being overtired and went back to bed. Yet, similar sounds started occurring more frequently at night. Sometimes it was low groans, other times hoarse whispers, and a few times I even heard what sounded like sobbing. Each time I investigated, I found no source. I began to wonder if there was a dark secret to this building or if it was truly haunted, as some co-workers hinted. When I tried discussing this with others, most were evasive, simply warning me not to get involved. Only one elderly cleaning lady discreetly mentioned that some bad things had happened there a few years ago, though she didn't know the details, and advised me to avoid wandering alone at night. This warning made me even more cautious. I started to observe my surroundings meticulously, looking for any suspicious clues. During one cleaning session, I accidentally found a small, blood-stained piece of cloth under a bed. My heart raced as my mind filled with dreadful speculations. I secretly kept the cloth, planning to investigate further. Just as I was gearing up for a deeper investigation, something even more terrifying occurred. One night, as I was about to sleep, I heard light footsteps outside my door. At first, I thought it was a co-worker, but the footsteps stopped in front of my door, followed by a soft scratching sound, like someone trying to pick the lock. My heart pounded in my chest, and cold sweat drenched my back. Holding my breath, I lay still, praying the person outside would go away. But the sound of the lock being tampered with grew louder. I knew I had to act or risk facing something terrible. Just as the door was about to open, I jumped up, grabbed the lamp from my bedside table, and prepared to confront the intruder. However, when I flung open the door, the hallway was empty. Trembling, I inspected the lock and found clear signs of tampering. This was no hallucination. I had indeed tried to break into my room. I stayed awake all night, vigilantly watching the door, fearing the intruder might return. At dawn, I packed my bags, deciding to leave this eerie place immediately. However, when I went to the front desk to resign, the manager was nowhere to be found. Instead, there was a stranger in his place. The stranger told me the manager had left suddenly for an urgent matter, and that he was the temporary in charge. When I expressed my desire to leave, his demeanor turned hostile, insisting I complete my contract term before leaving. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the situation was more dangerous than I had thought. Feigning compliance, I returned to my room and started planning my escape. Knowing the main entrance might be monitored, I decided to sneak out through a trail behind the mountains. I waited until deep into the night, ensuring everyone was asleep, then quietly climbed out of my window and headed toward the back trail. The forest at night was ominously dark, and every rustling leaf seemed to hide a threat. As I crept through the dense underbrush, every shadow and sound amplified my fear. The moonlight barely penetrated the thick canopy, casting eerie patterns on the forest floor. My heart raced with each step, the adrenaline keeping me alert. After what felt like hours of navigating through the forest, I finally reached a small clearing that connected to a dirt road. I followed the road, hoping it would lead me to a nearby town or at least a place where I could find help. Eventually, I stumbled upon a small village where the sight of people brought a rush of relief. The villagers were initially wary of a stranger appearing so late at night, but after explaining my situation, they kindly offered me shelter and contacted the local authorities. The police took my statement and promised to investigate the resort. In the following days, I stayed with a family in the village, too frightened to return to the city until the situation was resolved. The police discovered several unsettling things at the resort, including hidden cameras and evidence suggesting that guests and employees had been watched and possibly targeted. The manager and his accomplices were arrested, facing charges for various criminal activities. The experience left a profound mark on me. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings and more cautious in my choices. The nightmares continued for months, but with the help of therapy, I gradually regained a sense of security. Reflecting on that summer, I realized the importance of trusting my instincts and the value of seeking help when in danger. I learned to appreciate the support of strangers and the resilience within myself to survive such a harrowing ordeal. Although the memories still haunt me, especially during hot summer nights, I find strength in knowing that I faced and overcame a terrifying experience. It taught me about the darker side of human nature, but also about courage and the will to survive. It was a sweltering summer afternoon, the air heavy with suffocating humidity. I had just finished work for the day and was walking home, exhausted. The usually bustling streets were eerily empty, as if the entire city was preparing for an impending storm. I quickened my pace, hoping to get home before the rain started. Just then, a black van slowly drove up and stopped beside me. The window rolled down, revealing the face of a strange man. He seemed to be asking something, but I politely shook my head and continued walking towards home. However, an uneasy feeling lingered. Turning a corner, I was horrified to see the black van appear ahead of me again. This time, the door flew open, and two masked men jumped out. My heart rate instantly skyrocketed, adrenaline surging. Without waiting for them to get close, I turned and ran. I could hear rapid footsteps behind me, knowing they were in pursuit. I ran desperately, crossing empty streets and ducking into narrow alleys. The footsteps behind me alternated between near and far, but I didn't dare look back, fearing that a moment's distraction would lead to my capture. The rain finally started, beginning as a drizzle before quickly turning into a downpour. The rain blurred my vision, and the slippery ground nearly caused me to fall several times. But fear drove me to keep running. I don't know how long I ran, only feeling the burning in my lungs. Turning another corner, I saw an abandoned old house ahead. In desperation, I decided to hide inside. I quickly rushed into the house, hiding behind a pile of dilapidated furniture. I held my breath, trying to calm my racing heart. Rainwater dripped from my hair, my clothes clinging to my body, soaked through, but I couldn't worry about that now. Before long, I heard the creaking sound of the door being pushed open. Someone had entered. I curled up in the corner, not daring to make a sound. Footsteps echoed in the room, and I could sense them searching for traces of me. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, fearing they might hear it. Suddenly, a beam from a flashlight swept across my hiding spot. I held my breath, my body rigid. The light lingered on me for a few seconds, then moved away. I sighed in relief, but still didn't dare to move. The footsteps gradually faded away, finally disappearing into the sound of rain. I waited for a long time, making sure they had truly left before carefully crawling out of my hiding place. The house was pitch black, with only occasional flashes of lightning from outside providing brief moments of illumination. I fumbled towards the door, deciding to seize this opportunity to escape. Just as I was about to reach the door, a strong hand suddenly grabbed my shoulder. I turned in terror to see a tall figure standing before me. I instinctively screamed, struggling to escape, but the hand held me firmly. At this critical moment, a flash of lightning illuminated the room. In that brief moment of light, I saw the face of the person who had grabbed me. To my surprise, it was a police officer. As it turned out, neighbors had heard unusual noises and called the police. The man who had been chasing me had long since fled. I collapsed to the ground, my tense nerves finally relaxing. The police officer helped me up and took me to safety. In the police car, I reflected on what had just happened, still shaken. In the days that followed, I remained in a state of shock. Every time I heard a car or footsteps, I would involuntarily tense up. Nights were especially difficult, as I often dreamed of being chased, waking up in a cold sweat. The police increased patrols in that area but never found any trace of the black van or those men. I moved away from that neighborhood to a safer place. However, the shadow left by that experience lingered for a long time. Months later, I saw a news report. The police had busted a criminal gang specializing in kidnapping young women, including the men who had chased me that day. It turned out they had been active around the city and were responsible for multiple cases. Seeing this news, I felt both relieved and frightened. If I hadn't escaped in time that day, I might have become another one of their victims. That was a summer I would never forget. The oppressive heat seemed endless, and the air was suffocatingly humid. I had just graduated from college and was interning at a small advertising company. That day, I stayed late at the office, working overtime. Night had long fallen, and the streets were almost deserted. As I walked home, sweat soaked through my shirt, sticking uncomfortably to my back. Despite the late hour, the city's heat showed no signs of letting up. Street lights had cast a yellow glow, forming pools of light on the ground, and my shadow flickered between them. As I turned a corner, a strange feeling suddenly washed over me. I couldn't pinpoint what it was, but my intuition told me something was wrong. I quickened my pace, my heartbeat accelerating with it. That's when I noticed a black van slowly driving up and parking by the curb. The van's windows were tinted dark, making it impossible to see inside. A sense of foreboding surged through me. I tried to stay calm and kept walking, but I could clearly sense that the van was creeping along behind me. Sweat started to bead on my palms as I involuntarily picked up my pace. Turning the next corner, I abruptly darted into an alley. Behind me, I heard the screeching of brakes and the sound of a card, or being flung open. Terror flooded over me like a tidal wave. I broke into a run, weaving through the maze-like alleyways. Adrenaline coursed through me, temporarily masking the pain in my legs. The footsteps behind me grew louder, and I could hear the labored breathing of my pursuer, alarmingly close. My heart pounded so violently it felt like it might burst from my chest. In my desperation, I spotted an abandoned old house. Its shattered windows and peeling walls looked especially eerie in the twilight. With no other choice, I bolted inside and hid behind a pile of decaying furniture. Holding my breath, I tried to remain as silent as possible. The footsteps grew nearer and then stopped at the door. I could feel someone searching the room, the floorboards creaking under their weight. In the darkness, I saw the beam of a flashlight sweeping through the room, casting eerie shadows on the walls and ceiling. The light moved slowly, eventually stopping near where I was hiding. My heart nearly stopped, every muscle in my body tensed. Just as I thought I was about to be discovered, a police siren wailed outside. The pursuer seemed startled and quickly left the house. I waited in the darkness for what felt like an eternity, ensuring they were truly gone before cautiously crawling out of my hiding spot. My legs were weak from prolonged tension, and I clung to the walls, slowly making my way outside. Night had fully descended, and the streets were empty. Forcing myself to stay calm, I headed straight to the nearest police station. There I reported everything that had happened. The police took my statements seriously and dispatched officers to investigate the abandoned house and surrounding area. The next few days, I was in a state of constant anxiety. Any car engine or footsteps would make me tense up. Nights were the worst. He kept dreaming of being chased, waking up drenched in sweat. A week later, the police informed me that they had found some suspicious evidence in the basement of the abandoned house, including ropes, tape, and some personal items. The discoveries horrified me, making me realize how narrowly I had escaped a greater disaster. This experience drastically changed my life. I became much more vigilant, always aware of my surroundings. I started learning self-defense skills and bought personal protection equipment. Whenever I went out, I made sure to tell family or friends my whereabouts and expected return time. However, the shadow of fear didn't dissipate. I grew afraid of being alone, especially at night. Even at home, I constantly checked and rechecked that doors and windows were securely locked. Any strange noise would immediately jolt me awake, my heart racing. To cope with this fear, I sought psychological counseling. The therapist helped me understand post-traumatic stress disorder and taught me relaxation and meditation techniques. Gradually, I learned to control my panic and regain balance in my life. Yet the memory of that summer night lingered in my mind. It was like an unshakable nightmare, resurfacing whenever I felt most vulnerable. Sometimes I would imagine what might have happened if I hadn't escaped. These thoughts always sent chills down my spine. As time went on, I began to pay attention to similar cases and public safety issues. I got involved in activities aimed at raising community safety awareness, hoping my experience could serve as a warning to others. This participation helped heal my inner trauma to some extent, making me feel empowered rather than helpless. Nevertheless, every summer, especially on those sweltering nights, that uneasy feeling would resurface. I would involuntarily recall every detail of that night: the appearance of the black van, the chase through the alley, hiding in the abandoned house. The memories were so vivid, as if it all happened just yesterday.